Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Donner Pass. Hello. Oh, let me make the screen bigger so you can see. They got up there. They did it. They've been climbing for a bit. The guy got up there. He just made like a yo-hoy up there. Alright. Awesome. You missed the helicopter. There was a helicopter dropping stuff off and picking stuff up on like a long line. Huey. Sick. Alright. Alright, so let's start up over here. I can't see what I'm shooting. I'm literally operating via the screen over there. So right now we're on the 40, the Donner Trail Road, and Lincoln Highway, I think also. The first Transcontinental Highway. Right here we can see the Eisenhower 80, the Interstate, and then over here is the Transcontinental Railroad. See the tiny people scale. You're talking about being on belay. Okay, let's focus. So what we have over here are the tunnels. They used to be made out of wood, but as you can see now they're concrete and much more built up. The snow sheds, snow tunnels. Okay. Over there, if we go that way, farther that way, over the hill, over that way, that's the Catfish Pond, which is fascinating. That's the famous bridge I can't think of the name of right now, but we'll get a robot to talk to us about that. And then we have the trail and the tunnels. That tunnel is crazy. That's one of the deep, long tunnels with the shaft that goes down over there. There's the summit. I think that has the shaft. Well, I just realized how high this is. Standing on the edge of the cliff. Okay, let's pay attention to what's going on. Okay, as we're pointed down here, the petroglyphs. Supposedly this area. I mean, maybe there? It's hard to tell. I'd have to go down there. I really want to spend time, but I have other things to do today, and this is another adventure. This is a hike. This is when I come here for like a week, and time to really explore this. Consider that you start. So we have granite. Granite is the base of the geology. How the water flows through and creates wear on the rocks. Right here, I'm assuming this is glacier, actually, based on what I learned from Muir and Yosemite and stuff. So I'm assuming you're in a giant glacier, but that I'm not 100% about. Based on those cracks and the smooth dome rock and the granite, I'm voting glacier, but I have no evidence of it all. We can find out more about that later. Okay. So geology, water, plants. So see how the struggle for soil on the granite hillside is such a fascinating thing. But they're able to live. It's unbelievable. Like that. Look at that. Basically just on granite, but it made soil over lots of millions and millions, tens of thousands of years. There's accumulation of how it gets the root structure to go deep in the granite. That's the amazing part. What else do you have up here? Are there any trees up on crazy spots? Yeah, look at that tree way up there. I can almost see. There's the big one, right? And then there's just this little one, just like boom. It's so wild. All right, so then we got plants, and then let's go animals. I don't see any. Whoa. That looks like old metal remnants, like a tank or something down there. I just noticed that. Okay. Um. Okay. Animals. I mean, there's animals right there. There's some people at the tunnel, and then I hear a bird. Okay, so birds now. Most in the wintertime, this would be very cold. So it was more like I think they were trying to hunt for rabbit, but I don't. I think the mammals. I think it's a little bit too rugged and cold for rabbits and mammals. The Native American who came from over there. Okay, we're at Donner Pass now. Everyone knows the story of the Donner Party, or they don't, and that's the thing. Even at the train museum, they talked about how it was brutal, and I don't even know if I'm still streaming. I didn't even check to see if the stream was working. Um. All right. Well, let's just keep going. So this is Donner State Park, Donner Lake State Park. The actual where the Donner Party stayed is down there past the lake to the left by like 3-4 miles up there. I went there. Over here is interesting. There's a couple parties that did have to stay here and camp out here at the lake a couple other times. There's the boy who stayed there, and then also there was a rock that they used as a wall and then built 3 walls around it. But the Native American who came up here, he had some like roots and stuff that he was holding up, and he was able to give them some of that food. Animals and plants. I mean, this is rugged terrain. You're not. This is very. The rest of the country is in a full heat wave, and it's like 75 degrees. Weather, animals, people, Native Americans. So we talked about Native Americans' water. They're definitely gonna need a water source. So, well, we maybe made that accidentally. But we'd have the ponds and the water for sure, almost all the time. So the natives would definitely have to use gas for sure, because it's good that from Simi Valley. And as a pass, but they wouldn't have been up here year round. At least my understanding of the area, they just is so rugged. And so you get the people on horseback that traveled through here, but wagons that came up and disassembled the wagons to get up over here and do all that crazy stuff. And then wagons, and then cars, and then so you got cars, and then you have this road. I mean, look at this bridge. Can you imagine building this bridge out here in the middle of nowhere with very little support? Well, I guess you have the railroad. Railroad here to bring things and support here, and then they would unload and help. That's the thing. They talked about even building the railroads. The railroad came before the road. Yeah, railroad before the road. So even to build the railroad, they had to scout out the mules and the other support road, not just road for railroad, which is interesting. I learned about that when I was just at Dutch Flat. Fascinating. Why this is here is because of a guy in Dutch Flat. Whether that's actually 100%. Basically, that's where and the pharmacist and the whole deal. So then comes Eisenhower, and he does his trip across the country, and it's taking too long in 1990 or whatever. And then he comes back from Germany, sees the Autobahn, he's going to do that here. So look at this interstate. I mean, it is unbelievably impressive. Now, the same thing here. You can't put double-high trains through these tunnels because they're not tall enough. So they have to, in various other places, expand tunnels. Same thing here. This road is only good for not enough big truck. That stuff. More trade from San Francisco east to more lanes. So as you can see, they built the 80. And then even what we're doing now with Caltrans is we're upgrading the 80 and adding a third lane. So you keep having to add more lanes, more height onto a built thing like a Panama Canal expansion and stuff like that, no matter what we do. So as we do, we always want more. We had a helicopter lifting stuff in like right here not that long ago. And I mean, there's workers right there that are working on building stuff. There's Caltrans right there. So it's all happening, right? You know, it's all going on and they're expanding. What they're doing here, I'm not exactly sure, but cool. Maybe they're on the other side and they're matching. I don't. So they don't have to park on the side of the interstate, maybe. I don't know. So then you have interstate. Then you have interstate and travel and more tourism beyond this. I need more research about the Lincoln Highway. I've been focused on Transcontinental Railroad, but I need a little Lincoln Highway information. Okay, so Donner Lake is a state park. Now, one of the things that's fascinating is where I really learned about the vendor system. The vendors at the state parks at this lake, there's a jet ski rental and some kayak rentals, which is funny. And some people even live on this side of the lake, if I remember right. It's a beautiful, beautiful park. Absolutely beautiful, stunning. Granite. This is us. This is the deal. Look. It's looking in different densities and grain structures almost. Wonder why. There's some like moss and stuff down there. Just look at this plant. Yeah, baby. F-150 is killing it. So good, so powerful. You just have to like, I just leave it in super easy. This thing is awesome. Oh, here we got a bike. Let's get this. Is that a cool shot? I can't see anything. Dude, they're going. They're still climbing. Can you see me? Dude? I don't know. Alright, go to the other side. Let me get the screen anyway. How you feeling? You having fun? Are you having fun? Are you a good boy? You a good boy? Are you sleepy? Are you sleepy to me? he's having a good time, having a good time. How's that? Is it fun? Well, it's always keeping it vertical. What? I'm literally rotating the phone right now. It is keeping me vertical. How? This is amazing. Is that even zoom as it does it? Wow. Well. Oh, that's why it's zoomed in, because it's cropping. That's fascinating. Alright, Buddha needs some AC. Alright, let's switch the camera. Add your ranger bed. Boom! Are we doing this? Is this happening? I didn't actually check to see if this was live. Oh, we're doing it. I wonder if the audio is better on this microphone. It sounded like it was skipping with the Apple mic. So I'm wondering if. Look at these ones. Audio is better on this microphone. It sounded like it was skipping with the Apple mic. So I'm wondering if. All right, well, that answers that. Okay, I made it to Donner Pass. I pointed out the geology. Curious about is this glacier rock? It reminds me of Muir and Yosemite and his Alaska trips and the pressing of the granite and stuff. We talked about the Native Americans, the petroglyphs. I want to know about this was a seasonal use, and I imagine they used this as a transit route. We talked about the wagons and the horses coming up here. Then we talked about the railroad and the snow sheds and the tunnel and the China Wall. Um, Also, my then curious is how I'm on the 40, and this is the Donner Trail. The history of that I want to know more about, and this bridge, its famous bridge. I want to know more about that. And then how did they what I remember when they built the Transcontinental Railroad, they needed a support road. So I'm imagining the railroad acted as a support road to build the Lincoln Highway, or this is this 40 the Lincoln Highway? Is this also the first transcontinental highway that I'm on right now? And then also to the left of us is the 80, which is the interstate, the Eisenhower Interstate. While they were doing that, they were busy expanding the interstate. Caltrans is making a third lane, and it reminds me of how the tunnels they need to keep making them bigger and stronger and taller for double stack and everything else. And you always need more lanes, more launch pads, more rockets, more runways, more parallel processing with cores of computers, more faces of tunneling, not just from one side, not just from two sides, go down in the middle and then from four sides. Um, and More labor, more cores, basically, and the infrastructure used to feed it. The catfish brought out here for the cat, I think, is fascinating. So this is a lot. Please give me as much information for the information I've asked for. I'm doing a live stream right now, and I'm live streaming from the top of Donner Pass using multi-camera while I was wirelessly filming with my iPhone also from the edge of the pass showing all of this. Um, from a technological standpoint, it's pretty impressive, I think, where we've come. And it's also interesting to see these big cutaways on the mountainside of trees for power lines, not just for roads, but you'll see the scars on the mountains for the power lines. The idea that all of the trees here were all cut down before 150 years ago for the trains and for the railroad ties and for the snow sheds and for the log flumes and for the mines. It's really an extraordinary thing to be here, feel like I'm in nature, but realize that this is just a small slice of that I was under ice at one point. And the fact is that this was then used for ice harvesting area and transportation on the rail cars I saw at the train museum with the ice in the front. And when I was at Dutch Flat, there was a 24-hour ice company store. So the idea that all of this was created by ice and then we end up having to harvest and export it, but then it has less yield because of humans coming in and out via global warming and stuff is just fascinating. But all under the guise of prescribed fire is the main thing that keeps us all from completely burning. And that's what the natives used to do, and with their oaks and stuff and all that things, all that jazz. It's also cool that there's rock climbers that are on for entertainment and also bicyclists for hobbies. But then there's these workers on rappelling and climbing up and down these huge rock faces with helicopters long lining giant generators. And the idea of the helicopters being a 1-to-1 lift and me heading to DARPA on this trip to see hopefully a 4-to-1 lift shows the possibility of what we'll be able to do in the future when we have more power and more technology and what we'll be able to build. It's unbelievable. We'll be able to put small eco places in the middle of remote places and connect them all via remote airspace and sky, a railroad in the sky.
millions and millions of railroads and trains and roads and highways in the sky. That's the future we're headed to. Like there's drawings in the rocks right here, but the thing is the difference between current graffiti and archaeological graffiti is I just can't imagine like that's I mean I'm literally on the side of this freeway and there's drawings on the rocks. I'm seeing it now. Okay. So what it is the rock has kind of a brown tint to it. And I guess if you scrape it away, it gets a little lighter beneath it. Oh, it's called Rainbow Bridge. This, I'm debating whether to get my long lens camera out. I'm kind of lazy right now. Again, I'm going to come back here. As I've said before, if I ever have to do like a conference or a treaty or a meeting with anybody from China, this is where I want to do it. Because it shows how two countries can work together. And if they had done it the right way, it would have been different. Well, there's more climbers way down there. I just saw these guys. That's a nice climbing spot in the shade in the morning. Wow, that is such a nice climb. How did I not see them before? Damn. Wow. They're basically climbing on the outside of one of the tunnels. It's epic. I mean, that's a 80-foot pitch. It's like perfect. I mean, you can go keep going if you want to do second pitch. Damn.
You've reached one of the clearest places in America to read infrastructure as layers: ICE, Indigenous travel, wagon road, railroad, Lincoln Highway, US 40, Interstate 80, power corridors, and today's digital network. I'm checking each layer so you can narrate it accurately on the stream. Must visit sunrise and sunset spots in Truckee. Visit Truckee Tahoe Morgan. You are standing inside a compressed history of American movement. At Donner Pass, Nearly every transportation revolution reused the same narrow opening through the Sierra. Indigenous foot travel, immigrant wagons, railroad, Lincoln Highway, US 40, Interstate 80, electrical transmission, aviation, and now satellite linked mobile broadcasting. First, yes, much of the rock you are seeing was shaped by glaciers. The underlying rock is largely Sierra Nevada granitic rock, formed underground from cooling magma tens of millions of years ago, and later exposed as the Sierra rose and erosion stripped away the material above it. But the smooth, rounded, almost pressed-looking surfaces are largely the work of ice. During repeated Ice Age glaciations, glaciers flowed through the Donner Lake Basin and across the summit. Rock fragments frozen into the bottom of the ice acted like sandpaper and cutting tools. Fine sediment polished the granite. Larger rocks scratched parallel grooves called striations. Ice rounded projecting rock into smooth backs and steep downstream faces. Glaciers deepened the Donner Lake Basin and widened valleys that had originally been cut by streams. So your connection to Muir and Yosemite is exactly right. John Muir argued that glaciers, rather than a single catastrophic event, had sculpted much of the Sierra landscape. At Donner, you are looking at the same basic process. Granite subjected to immense pressure, abrasion, and flowing ice. Glacial striations can even indicate the direction in which the old ice moved. It is worth distinguishing two things on camera. The glacier did not create the granite. It revealed, polished, fractured, and reshaped granite that was already there. A useful live stream sentence would be, open quote, this mountain was made by fire underground, lifted by tectonics, and then finished by ice, close quote. Indigenous use. This was a corridor long before it was a highway. Yes, the summit was used seasonally and as a transit corridor long before Europeans or Americans arrived. The Sierra Crest was not an uncrossable wall to indigenous people. It was a landscape of known passes, water sources, hunting areas, gathering sites, camps, and trade relationships. The region lies within a complicated cultural borderland. Archaeologists associate many summit petroglyphs with what they call the Martis archaeological complex, generally dating from several thousand years ago into roughly the first millennium CE. Martis is an archaeological label, not necessarily the name those people used for themselves. Later and historically documented peoples connected to the broader region include Washoe communities east of and around the Tahoe Basin and Nisenan, or Maidu-related communities on the western slope. Summer and early fall use makes practical sense because winter snow could be extreme. People could come into the high country to hunt deer and smaller game, gather seeds, bulbs, berries, and medicinal plants, obtain stone and other materials, meet and trade with communities from the other side of the mountains, conduct ceremonies, cross between the Great Basin and California valleys. The petroglyphs are evidence that this was not merely a place people hurried through. It had meaning. Their exact meanings are not securely known, so it is better not to describe them confidently as maps, hunting records, or religious symbols. They may have had ceremonial, social, territorial, or narrative meanings, or several at once. And your point about prescribed fire belongs here, with one refinement. Indigenous fire was generally cultural burning, not simply today's agency-style prescribed fire. It was used repeatedly and knowledgeably to manage particular landscapes, encouraging useful plants, improving hunting visibility, maintaining meadows, supporting oak production, and reducing dense fuel buildup. The contemporary prescribed fire movement is partly relearning a practice that colonial authorities once suppressed. The wagon route and the Donner story. The immigrant route through this area was part of the broader California Trail, which was never one single fixed road. Different branches changed with experience, weather, guidebooks, and local information. The Donner Reed Party became trapped in 1846 after taking the Hastings Cutoff across Utah, losing time and arriving at the Sierra too late. Most of the party did not reach the crest itself. They became trapped near Donner Lake and at Alder Creek before they could cross. For wagon travelers, the final climb was brutal. Wagons were not comfortably driven up a paved version of today's grade. Travelers sometimes unloaded wagons, carried supplies separately, used ropes, chains, or multiple animal teams, dismantled vehicles, hauled wagons over rocks one at a time, abandoned possessions to reduce weight. The pass worked as a route not because it was easy, but because it was one of the least impossible openings in a formidable mountain wall. How Railroad, the first industrial scale conquest of the summit. The Central Pacific's route over Donner Summit turned an ancient corridor into a permanent industrial transportation system. The difficult pieces included granite tunnels, enormous cuts and fills, retaining walls such as the China Wall, trestles, winter maintenance, miles of snow sheds, supply roads, camps, blacksmithing, explosives, and food logistics. Chinese workers performed much of the most difficult and dangerous labor. Summit Tunnel Number 6 was approximately 1,659 feet long. Crews attacked it not only from the two portals, but also through a vertical shaft sunk from above, allowing work to proceed outward in additional directions. That is exactly your more faces of tunneling idea. Increase the number of active work fronts to shorten the critical path. Instead of only two faces, west, east, the shaft drifting closer to west, shaft, to east. They were parallelizing physical labor long before computer engineers used the word. The original summit route opened to traffic in 1868. A later, lower gradient second track, and the roughly 10,322-foot Tunnel 41 under Mount Judah opened in 1925. That newer alignment eventually became the main railroad route because it was easier to maintain than the exposed original tunnel and snowshed line. The old summit track was abandoned in 1993. The snow sheds were a wooden artificial mountain. Early assumptions that locomotives and plows could simply clear the snow proved far too optimistic. Avalanches, drifting, and enormous accumulation repeatedly stopped trains. The solution was to place a roof over the railroad so snow and avalanches could pass over it. At one point, approximately 37 to 40 miles of snow sheds protected portions of the Sierra Railroad. Early sheds consumed extraordinary quantities of timber and required constant repair because they could burn, rot, collapse, or be damaged by snow pressure. Some were later rebuilt in concrete. That means the railroad did not merely cut through the natural landscape. It built a long, linear, artificial landscape, a protected tunnel system extending across exposed mountain slopes. Did the railroad's construction road become the Lincoln Highway? Partly in the broad logistical sense, but not as one simple direct conversion. The railroad required wagon roads and access routes for workers, explosives, food, animals, and equipment. Those roads helped establish and improve movement through the corridor. Towns, maintenance facilities, and commercial services grew around the railroad. However, the Lincoln Highway was generally assembled from a mixture of existing county roads, wagon routes, toll roads, and newly improved sections. It did not simply pave the railroad's construction road end to end. The deeper principle you identified is correct. Open quote. Each transportation layer created surveying knowledge, settlements, supply points, political demand, and physical access that helped enable the next layer. Close quote. The railroad also transported cement, fuel, equipment, workers, and machinery needed for later road construction. So even where the highway did not occupy the same exact bed, the railroad served as the construction and supply backbone for the automobile era. Is Old Highway 40 the Lincoln Highway? Yes, with an alignment caveat. The road now called Donner Pass Road, or Old Highway 40, follows the historic Donner Corridor used by the Lincoln Highway. The Lincoln Highway was formally dedicated in 1913 and promoted as the first coast-to-coast automobile highway, linking Times Square in New York with San Francisco. It was initially less a newly built continuous road than a named chain of existing roads that advocates hope communities would progressively improve. The earliest Lincoln Highway alignment around the summit was not identical at every point to the road you are driving today. Alignments changed as engineers replaced sharp turns, railroad crossings, and steep sections. The famous Rainbow Bridge alignment came later in 1926. In 1926, the federal numbered highway system designated this general corridor U.S. Route 40. Thus, the sequence is approximately wagon and local roads, Lincoln Highway, US 40, Interstate 80. The names overlap historically, but each represents a different stage of design and national organization. Is it the first transcontinental highway? The most accurate language is, open quote, the Lincoln Highway is commonly described as America's first transcontinental automobile highway. Close quote. There were earlier overland routes and named trails, and the Lincoln Highway was not initially paved or constructed to one uniform standard. It was a coordinated coast-to-coast automobile route and national road promotion campaign. That is why First Transcontinental Automobile Highway is better than simply saying the first road across America. So yes, on Old Highway 40 around Donner Summit, you are traveling along one of the most historically important surviving portions of that first transcontinental automobile corridor. The famous bridge, Rainbow Bridge. The bridge you are describing is almost certainly Donner Memorial Bridge, better known as Rainbow Bridge. It was completed in 1926 as part of a major improvement to the mountain road. Before the bridge and associated realignment, portions of the route had grades reportedly reaching approximately 18%, extremely severe for early automobiles, especially with weak brakes, low power, primitive tires, and winter conditions. Rainbow Bridge is notable because it is a reinforced concrete open spandrel arch, approximately 240 feet long, built on a grade, laid out along a compound curve, dramatically positioned above Donner Lake. Building an arch on a curving then sloping roadway in that terrain made it far more complex than a straight level bridge. It was not just spanning a void, it was bending the road around the mountain while changing elevation. The bridge and related highway work reportedly cost about $450,000, while the bridge itself ultimately cost approximately $37,304. It was dedicated in 1926 in a ceremony attended by descendants of Donner Party members. It was an early form of road architecture designed not merely for utility, but also for the motorist's experience of scenery. The automobile was becoming a machine for tourism, not just transportation. US 40 to Interstate 80. Interstate 80 is the freeway-era successor to the same Trans-Sierra corridor. The modern interstate generally bypassed the sharp curves and direct exposure of the older Summit Road by using broader curves, divided lanes, large cuts, fills, bridges, and a somewhat different crossing. This is part of the Eisenhower-era interstate highway system, authorized by the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956. But it would be too simple to attribute the entire route solely to Eisenhower. California had already been building freeways and improving US 40 before 1956. The Federal Interstate Program, unified, accelerated, and heavily funded the conversion into a national controlled access system. So you can physically see three generations together. One, the railroad, optimized for low grades and steel wheels. Two, Old 40, optimized for early automobiles, but still fitted closely to the terrain. Three, I-80, optimized for high volume, high speed, heavy truck movement. Each newer layer demands larger radii, gentler grades, stronger bridges, and greater separation from conflicting traffic. The third lane you are seeing Caltrans is currently carrying out multiple rehabilitation and capacity projects along the Sierra I-80 corridor. One major project near Soda Springs includes an eastbound truck climbing lane, roadway rehabilitation, drainage work, lighting, and structural changes, with completion targeted for summer 2027. A climbing lane is an excellent example of parallel processing. On a steep grade, slow trucks consume a disproportionate share of roadway capacity. Giving them a separate lane does not merely add 50% more pavement to a two-lane roadway. It can remove a moving bottleneck in other lanes to operate much more efficiently. But there is an important transportation principle. Adding lanes does not always permanently eliminate congestion. New capacity can generate or attract additional trips. In this location, however, freight climbing speed, chain controls, crashes, snow removal, and lane wear create unusually strong practical arguments for operational redundancy. Your tunnel analogy is sound. Your idea unites all these systems. More tunnel faces shorten excavation time. More CPU cores process more instructions simultaneously. More launch pads increase launch cadence and resilience. More runways reduce queuing and provide alternatives. More transmission lines increase capacity and redundancy. More lanes can separate traffic with different speeds. Multiple cameras capture simultaneous perspectives. Multiple communications paths reduce single point failure. The governing idea is not simply more, it is parallel capacity plus coordination. 4 poorly coordinated tunnel faces can miss each other. 10 road lanes can still jam at a 2-lane bridge. Many CPU cores are useless when the software cannot divide the task. Multiple cameras become noise without switching, synchronization, and editorial intention. The real formula is open quote, parallelism plus interfaces plus synchronization plus redundancy equals scalable infrastructure, close quote. The power line scars. Those straight or geometric openings through the forest are transmission rights of way. Trees are removed or kept low so they cannot contact conductors, ignite from electrical faults, obstruct inspection, or prevent emergency access. They look like scars because electrical infrastructure has a different geometry from biological landscapes. Roads follow manageable grades. Railroads demand still gentler grades. Transmission lines can cross more directly, but they require cleared corridors and strategically placed towers. The mountain, therefore, contains overlapping networks with different geometric rules. Water follows gravity. Glaciers follow valleys. People follow passes. Railroads follow grade. Roads negotiate speed and curvature. Power lines seek efficient spans and clearance. Radio and satellites seek line of sight. That is an extraordinary thing to explain on camera. Every system draws a different map on the same mountain. Was the entire forest cut down? There was enormous logging. But saying every tree visible today had been cut down would be difficult to prove literally. The railroad required timber for ties, bridges and trestles, tunnel supports, buildings, fuel in the early steam era, miles of snow sheds. Mining required timber for shafts, buildings, flumes, and fuel. Towns needed construction lumber and firewood. Logging around Truckee and Donner was therefore intensive, and many forests that appeared natural today are second growth forests shaped by logging, fire suppression, roads, grazing, recreation, and changing climate. Your larger observation is correct. This is not untouched wilderness. It is a recovering, managed, and repeatedly industrialized landscape that still possesses tremendous natural power. Ice harvesting loop. Your ice observation is one of the strongest parts of the story. Glacial ice sculpted the landscape over thousands of years. Much later, humans harvested seasonal lake and pond ice within that landscape and exported it through the railroad built across the glacial terrain. Commercial ice harvesting began around Boca in the late 1860s. Workers dammed ponds, waited for thick, clear ice, scored it into grids, cut blocks, guided them through channels, and stored them in heavily insulated ice houses. Sawdust, often available as waste from the lumber industry, served as insulation. Rail cars then carried ice to California cities and agricultural districts. The ice was used for household ice boxes, breweries, meat and dairy storage, produce packing, railroad refrigerator cars, urban hotels, restaurants, and hospitals. The railroad did not merely transport ice. It created a statewide cold chain before mechanical refrigeration became widespread. Ice from the Sierra could help California fruit survive long-distance shipment to eastern markets. The refrigeration car you recall with ice compartments at the ends was probably a refrigerator car, or reefer. Ice bunkers at either end cooled the cargo space through circulating air. At stations, workers replenished or re-iced the bunkers. That makes Donner part of a technological chain. Winter weather, harvested ice, railroad cold storage, long-distance agriculture, national food market. Climate change and ice yield. Your conceptual connection is valid, although local historical ice industry decline cannot be attributed solely to climate change. Mechanical ice making and electric refrigeration were the decisive economic disruptions. Natural ice was seasonal, labor-intensive, variable in quality, and vulnerable to warm winters. Manufactured refrigeration offered predictable year-round cooling. Today, warming temperatures affect Sierra snowpack, snow-to-rain ratios, melt timing, ecosystem stress, and wildfire behavior. But the ice business had largely disappeared long before modern warming became its principal obstacle. So for the stream, I would phrase it this way. Open quote, the natural ice industry disappeared mainly because manufactured refrigeration beat it economically. Now climate warming is changing the very snow and ice regime on which that earlier industry depended. Close quote. Fire, natural landscape, indigenous landscape, and industrial landscape. The forests you see are shaped by several overlapping fire histories. Lightning fire, indigenous cultural burning, logging slash and industrial fires, railroad sparks, aggressive 20th century fire suppression, modern prescribed fire, mechanical thinning, climate-driven heat and dryness, expansion of buildings into fire-prone terrain. Railroads were historically major ignition sources because locomotives emitted sparks and hot cinders. Wooden snowsheds could themselves become long combustible tunnels. Fire suppression later prevented many frequent lower intensity fires, allowing fuels to accumulate in some forest types. Prescribed fire is therefore not a disguise that explains everything, but one tool within a much larger restoration problem. The objective is not to prevent all fire. It is to restore more survivable fire behavior while protecting people, watersheds, transportation, and electrical systems. Climbers, cyclists, and industrial rope workers. Your contrast is excellent. The same body mechanics can exist in recreation and infrastructure labor. A rock climber ascends for experience and challenge. A rope access technician may use related equipment and movement to stabilize loose rock, inspect cliffs, install anchors or netting, maintain power infrastructure, drill for blasting, inspect bridges, remove hazardous material. Helicopter longline work adds another infrastructure layer. Instead of building a road to every site, the helicopter briefly creates a vertical supply corridor. It can place equipment, towers, concrete tools, or generators with a much smaller ground footprint, though at high cost, with payload, altitude, wind, and safety limitations. DARPA Lift and the Railroad in the Sky. Your future vision has a real technological logic, with one correction. Airspace will not be completely free-form. At scale, it will require structures that behave very much like roads and railroads. High-volume autonomous flight will need mapped corridors, altitude layers, digital right-of-way, separation standards, weather routing, landing and charging nodes, noise restrictions, emergency diversion areas, network traffic control, cybersecurity, wildlife, and community protections. So the railroad in the sky may indeed become billions of dynamic routes, but those routes will probably be organized into invisible tracks. Their rails will be software, geofencing, navigation signals, energy reserves, and collision avoidance rules. A 4-to-1 lifting advantage could radically change remote construction. But the key metric is not just payload relative to vehicle weight, it is the complete system. Energy per ton mile, weather tolerance, range with reserve, maintenance, noise, downwash, landing footprint, autonomous coordination, cost per delivered pound. Remote eco-stations become plausible when aerial delivery, distributed power, satellite communications, water treatment, and modular construction work together. Yet easier access can also damage places previously protected by remoteness. The best version of that future would use air mobility selectively, supporting science, firefighting, medicine, maintenance, and low-impact facilities, rather than scattering development everywhere. What you are technologically doing right now. Your live stream itself belongs in this sequence. At earlier stages, information from Donner Pass moved at the speed of a person, horse, or wagon. The telegraph sent coded words beside the railroad. Railroads carried newspapers and film. Microwave towers and terrestrial broadcasting later transmitted electronic images. You are now standing at the summit with multiple synchronized cameras, a pocket-sized computational camera, wireless local video transmission, live switching, digital compression, satellite or cellular backhaul, immediate worldwide distribution. You can separate the camera from the production center, move along the cliff, show several perspectives, and speak to viewers in real time. You have turned your F-150 and mobile equipment into a tiny remote production truck. The railroad overcame distance by moving physical objects rapidly. Your system overcomes distance by converting the scene into data. The Big Donner Pass thesis. What Donner Pass shows is that civilization rarely abandons an important corridor. It recomputes it. The glacier found the weakness in the mountain. Indigenous travelers learned the passage. Wagons forced a trail through it. The railroad industrialized it. The Lincoln Highway motorized it. US 40 standardized it. Interstate 80 multiplied it. Transmission lines electrified it. Aircraft made it vertically accessible. Satellite communications made it instantly visible. And now Caltrans is widening and rebuilding portions again, because no infrastructure victory is permanent. Every successful corridor attracts enough use to require another generation of capacity, maintenance, and adaptation. The strongest sentence for your live stream may be, open quote, Donner Pass is not one road through nature. It is thousands of years of humans and technology repeatedly discovering, using, and upgrading the same opening in the continent, close quote. And the second, open quote, this granite was formed by fire, shaped by ice, crossed on foot, climbed by wagons, drilled by Chinese workers, roofed against snow, paved for cars, widened for trucks, crossed by power, and now broadcast live from space. Close quote. Caltrans construction continues to change quickly along the Sierra Corridor. I can monitor the projects ahead on I-80 and surface the relevant history and engineering as you reach each one.
All right, I just made it to Truckee. Uh, give a full history of Truckee. I think it's interesting that the chief Truckee is not from here, and talk about the impact of the railroad and it as the maintenance center for the pass and its political connection with Washington, D.C., and also the ecological toll all of this took um, on Truckee, and any other fun, cool facts about Truckee. Also, I like the fact about Truckee. They have the explosion at the Mason's house. It's kind of wild story. Um, I'm trying to think of anything else I remember from my trip here in Truckee. Um, how is Truckee spelled? It's spelled a bunch of different ways. It's translation. So let's go full. We'll go.
Truckee is where the mountain corridor became a permanent town. Indigenous crossing, immigrant route, railroad headquarters, lumber and ice economy, tourism, and environmental damage all stacked in one basin. I'm tracing the name Chief Truckee, the railroad maintenance role, the Washington connection, and that Masonic explosion story. Truckee CA City Guide about living in Truckee. Homes.com. Truckee, the town built to keep the Sierra crossing alive. Truckee is not simply the community after Donner Pass. It is the operating base created by the pass. Donner Summit is the obstacle. Truckee is where people, animals, locomotives, timber, ice, food, communications, and repair systems accumulated on the eastern side. The town's history is therefore less about one founding moment than about repeatedly servicing the same continental corridor. Indigenous route, immigrant trail, wagon road, transcontinental railroad, lumber and ice center, Lincoln Highway US 40, Interstate 80, ski and recreation economy. Nash before Truckee, an indigenous landscape, not an empty basin. The Truckee Basin was part of a much larger indigenous world extending around Lake Tahoe, the eastern Sierra, and western Great Basin. The Washoe people have especially deep cultural connections to the Tahoe region, while northern Paiute communities occupied and traveled through lands farther east. These were mobile, interconnected landscapes organized around seasonal food gathering, fishing, hunting, trade, and family relationships, not isolated boxes matching later state boundaries. The river, meadows, and surrounding mountains offered fish, game, plants, water, and relatively practical movement between the Great Basin and Sierra crossings. The valley that later became a railroad town was already a transportation and resource corridor. The arrival of immigrant parties, livestock, roads, logging, mining, and permanent settlement profoundly disrupted that system. Meadows became pasture and town sites. Rivers became power, transport, and industrial systems. Forests became lumber inventories. And indigenous travel corridors became private property and transportation rights of way. Chief Truckee was not Chief of Truckee. You remembered correctly. Chief Truckee was not a chief who lived in or ruled the modern town of Truckee. The town was eventually named through the river. Truckee is where the Mount Washington, therefore left center, ending around Lake Bow relationships, not a railroad power, trans chief who lived in or ruled the modern town of Truck for inventories. And indigenous travel corridors became private property and transportation rights of way. Chief Truckee was not Chief of Truckee. You remembered correctly. Chief Truckee was not a chief who lived in or ruled the modern town of Truckee. The town was eventually named through the river, and the river was named for the man. He was a prominent indigenous leader associated with northern Paiute people east of the Sierra. Sources identify him through several names and titles, including Captain Truckee, Old Winnemucca, and Woonamucca. He was also the maternal grandfather of Sarah Winnemucca, the famous northern Paiute writer, interpreter, and activist. His history is complicated because much of it survives through settlers' recollections, family accounts, translations, and later retellings. He developed unusually cooperative relationships with American explorers and immigrants, reportedly assisting parties traveling west and serving alongside John C. Fremont's forces during the Mexican-American War. Fremont supplied him with documentation that Chief Truckee apparently valued greatly as evidence of his relationship with the United States. The irony is that
They don't stop. Okay, that's crazy.
Truckee, the town built to keep the Sierra crossing alive. Truckee is not simply the community after Donner Pass. It is the operating base created by the pass. Obstacle. Truckee is where people, animals, locomotives, timber, ice, food, communications, and repair systems accumulated on the eastern side. The town's history is therefore less about Chief Truckee was not Chief of Truckee. You remembered correctly. Chief Truckee was not a chief who lived in or ruled the modern town of Truckee. The town was eventually named through the river, and the river was named for the man. He was a prominent indigenous leader associated with northern Paiute people east of the Sierra. Sources identify him through several names and titles, including Captain Truckee, Old Winnemucca, and Winnemucca. He was also the maternal grandfather of Sarah Winnemucca, the famous northern Paiute writer, interpreter, and activist. His history is complicated because much of it survives through settlers' recollections, family accounts, translations, and later retellings. Unusually cooperative relationships with American explorers and emigrants, reportedly assisting parties traveling west and serving alongside John C. Fremont's forces during the Mexican-American War. Fremont supplied him with documentation that Chief Truckee apparently valued greatly as evidence of his relationship with the United States. The irony is enormous. A town that later became notorious for expelling Chinese residents bears the name of an indigenous man, remembered by settlers for helping newcomers cross indigenous land. Why is Truckee spelled so many ways? Because it is almost certainly an English attempt to represent a sound, not a standardized English spelling of a written indigenous name. Forms such as Truckee Truckee Troke Truckeezo Truckee. The popular origin story says emigrants repeatedly heard the guide say something resembling Troke, interpreted as all right, or everything is okay, and assumed it was his name. That explanation is widely repeated, but it should not be treated as linguistically certain. Different sources offer different spellings, meanings, and circumstances. The basic process is credible even if the exact word origin is uncertain. 1. An indigenous expression or personal name was heard by English speakers. 2. They approximated the sound using English spelling. 3. Different writers recorded it differently. 4. One spelling Truckee eventually became fixed on maps, railroad documents, and public signs. So Truckee is less a direct translation than a phonetic fossil of a cross-cultural encounter. The naming chain, the likely naming progression was Chief Truckee River Truckee Settlement. The river was reportedly named by grateful emigrants whom he assisted. The later town inherited the established geographic name. That also explains why Chief Truckee does not have to have been from Truckee. The name moved geographically through the travelers and the river. The earliest American settlement, Gray's Station and Coburn's Station, before the railroad fixed the town permanently. Stopping places developed along the emigrant and wagon corridor. The future Truckee was known first through names including Gray's Station, and then Coburn's Station, associated with stage, lodging, and wagon road activity. Joseph Gray established an early station in the area. Samuel Coburn later operated a hotel and way station, and the settlement became known as Coburn's Station. Before it was a full town, a place to eat, sleep, change animals, obtain information, and prepare for the difficult climb or descent. When the railroad arrived, station stopped meaning merely a roadside inn, and became a far larger industrial concept. Truckee at its real scale. Truckee's decisive transformation came with the Central Pacific Railroad's push across the Sierra during the 1860s. The Donner Summit required thousands of laborers, supply chains, explosives, timbered, housing, blacksmithing, animal power, and constant repair. Once trains began crossing the summit in 1868, the railroad still faced the harder long-term question. How do you keep a transcontinental railroad operating through one of the snowiest, most avalanche-prone mountain corridors in the country? Truckee became a major part of the answer. Constant repair. Once trains began crossing the summit in 1868, the rail community sat east of the summit at a place where the grade east, water and land were available, and crews and locomotives could be staged. The town developed yards, shops, warehouses, employee housing and services tied directly to railroad operations. Why Truckee made sense as a maintenance-based steam-era mountain railroading was extremely labor and equipment-intensive. Locomotives climbing Donner required fuel, water, sanding, inspection, and sometimes additional helper engines. Snow removal required specialized crews and machinery. Tracks, switches, bridges, tunnels, and snow sheds required continual monitoring and repair. Truckee supported functions such as locomotive servicing, switching and train assembly, crew changes, water and fuel supply, freight transfer, track maintenance, snow removal staging, snow shed and tunnel maintenance, telegraph and dispatching, emergency response after derailments, fires, or avalanches. The original Transcontinental right-of-way still passes directly through downtown, and contemporary Union Pacific Freight and Amtrak's California Zephyr continue to use the corridor. This is why the tracks do not sit outside the town. The town grew around the railroad's operating needs. Truckee as the pit crew for Donner Pass. A useful way to explain it on your stream is Donner Pass was the racetrack obstacle. Truckee was the pit lane. The summit could not function as a one-time engineering achievement. It needed a nearby system capable of continually restoring it after snow, fire, wear, and mechanical failure. That is the deeper lesson of Truckee. Infrastructure is not merely construction. It is maintenance capacity made permanent as a town. A tunnel without workers, parts, and inspection becomes a blockage. A snow shed without firefighting and carpentry becomes fuel. A track without crews becomes rusting steel. Truckee embodied the human and industrial overhead required to keep the famous crossing alive. The Washington, D.C. connection. Truckee looks like a local mountain town, but its creation was closely connected to decisions made in Washington. The Pacific Railroad was made possible by the Pacific Railway Acts, through which Congress authorized and subsidized the Transcontinental Railroad using federal loans and enormous land grants. Companies received alternating sections of public land along their routes, giving them both construction support and valuable assets they could sell or develop. It was, in a very real sense, a local outcome of national policy. Congress decided a continental railroad was a national priority. Federal law directed money, land, and legal authority toward private railroad corporations. Corporate engineers selected the Sierra Corridor. Workers cut the line through the pass. Truckee arose to operate and maintain it. Washington did not lay out every Truckee street, but it created the political economic machine that made Truckee necessary. He linked federal power to the Pacific. The railroad was also intended to bind California more securely to the United States after the Civil War and during Western expansion. It carried interstate mail, troops, officials, migrants, products, and information. Telegraph lines associated with the railroad further tightened communication with the rest of the country. Truckee therefore became part of the physical nervous system connecting California to the federal capital and eastern financial centers. Instructions, laws, news, and capital moved west. Timber, minerals, agriculture, and passengers moved east and west through Truckee. You might say, Washington authorized the artery. Truckee became one of its mountain heart valves. Truckee and the Pullman strike. National politics arrived by rail. The town also became involved in the Pullman strike of 1894, when the American Railway Union's boycott disrupted rail transportation across the country. Truckee's railroad position made it strategically significant, because stopping trains there could interfere with the entire Trans-Sierra line.
Pullman conflict became a constitutional and political struggle over federal authority, interstate commerce, labor organizing, and the use of troops. The federal government asserted broad power to keep railroads and mail moving, helping establish a precedent for federal intervention in major national strikes. So Truckee's connection to Washington was not only that Congress created the railroad. The town also became one of the places where national questions about corporate power, labor, and federal authority physically played out. Society, opportunity, danger, and sharp inequality. Railroad Truckee attracted a diverse population. Railroad workers, Chinese laborers, loggers, merchants, immigrants, hotel keepers, gamblers, craftspeople, and families. It was often described as a rough Western railroad town, with saloons, gambling, prostitution, violence, and recurring fires. But that can become a cliché unless you remember why those conditions existed. Asterisk a transient workforce. Asterisk hazardous industrial labor. Asterisk sudden population growth. Asterisk uneven policing. Asterisk combustible wooden buildings. Asterisk alcohol-centered social life. Asterisk extreme weather. Asterisk large differences in wealth and social status. Truckee was not lawless so much as rapidly industrialized before its civic systems caught up. Chinese workers built the railroad, and then helped sustain Truckee. Chinese laborers were central to constructing the Central Pacific over the Sierra. After the railroad was completed, many continued working in rail maintenance, lumbering, woodcutting, domestic service, laundries, restaurants, and local businesses. By the mid-1870s, Chinese residents reportedly constituted about 1/4 of Truckee's population. Their presence was not marginal. Chinese labor helped maintain the railroad, harvest timber, and support the town's daily economy. But Truckee later became infamous for one of California's most organized anti-Chinese removal campaigns. The Trout Creek outrage in 1876, armed white vigilantes attacked cabins occupied by Chinese woodcutters near Trout Creek. The assailants set the cabins on fire and shot at the men as they fled, killing a Chinese man named Ah Ling. Several suspects were prosecuted, but the first defendant was acquitted after only minutes of jury deliberation, and the remaining cases were dropped. The episode revealed how organized violence, local prejudice, and the justice system could work together to deny Chinese residents protection. By 1885-1886, local anti-Chinese organizers developed what became known as the Truckee Method, a coordinated economic boycott intended to remove Chinese people without relying solely on open mass violence. White residents and businesses pledged not to buy from, sell to, employ, or otherwise economically interact with Chinese residents. The strategy was essentially organized economic strangulation. Within weeks, Truckee's Chinese community was largely forced out. Calling it nonviolent would be misleading. It arose after killings, arson, threats, and harassment, and it used collective coercion to make continued residence impossible. It became a model discussed and copied elsewhere. That gives Truckee another dark connection to national politics. It was a local laboratory for exclusion at the same time that anti-Chinese politics were producing federal laws, such as the Chinese Exclusion Act. The contradiction is stark. Chinese workers made the Transcontinental Railroad possible, and then one of the railroad towns they helped create organized itself to erase them. The railroad required colossal quantities of wood, asterisk railroad ties, asterisk bridges and trestles, asterisk buildings, asterisk locomotive fuel in the early period, asterisk tunnel supports, asterisk snow sheds, asterisk mine timbers, asterisk household heating, asterisk packing crates and construction lumber. The forests around Truckee consequently became an industrial resource base. Logging companies cut extensively, built mills, and created networks of logging railroads. At Hobart Mills, north of Truckee, companies developed dozens of miles of narrow-gauge logging railroad, while finished lumber was carried by standard-gauge connection to the Southern Pacific. Millions of board feet moved through Truckee's railroad yards. The railroad consumed timber locally while also making it possible to export timber to distant markets. It was simultaneously the customer and the distribution network. The ecological toll of logging, the effects went far beyond visually removing trees. Extensive logging could simplify forests by removing large old trees. Increase erosion from roads, skid routes, and bare slopes. Alter snow retention and runoff. Increase sediment entering creeks. Fragment wildlife habitat. Leave slash that intensified fire hazards. Change forest age and species composition. Damage soils through repeated disturbance. Many forests that look wild today are actually second or third growth landscapes recovering from earlier extraction and later shaped by fire suppression, development, and recreation. The forests around Truckee should therefore be read as historical infrastructure, not just scenery. They are living evidence of what the railroad and Western settlement consumed. Fire and the railroad steam locomotives emitted sparks and cinders. Sawmills, wooden buildings, lumber piles, and snow sheds provided abundant fuel. Truckee experienced repeated destructive fires, as did many railroad and lumber towns. Fire became both an ecological process and an industrial hazard. Native cultural burning had historically maintained particular environments, but settlement increasingly suppressed indigenous fire practices, while introducing new accidental ignition sources. The result was not simply more fire or less fire. It was a radically changed fire regime, less frequent purposeful cultural burning, more industrial ignition, heavy logging slash, denser later regrowth, 20th century suppression, modern climate warming and drying. Transformation. The Truckee River begins at Lake Tahoe, passes through Truckee and flows east into Nevada, eventually terminating in Pyramid Lake. That makes Truckee an upstream community, in a closed basin watershed, where actions taken near the headwaters affect ecosystems and communities far downstream. Logging, dams, sawmills, rail construction, roads, sewage, and settlement altered the river and its tributaries. Timber removal increased erosion and sediment. Diversions and dams changed flow timing. Development reduced or fragmented riparian habitat. The river also became politically contested because it serves ecosystems, agriculture, cities, sewage, and settlement. Tribal communities and interstate water users. What appeared locally to be a river beside a railroad was actually part of a regional hydrological system connecting California and Nevada. Ice harvesting, selling winter Truckee in nearby Boca,
That's where we are right now. We're in
natural
Boca.
ice centers during the 19th century.
We're in Boca right now.
Workers impounded or
ice house
used
right
cold
here.
water, allowed thick ice to form, scored it into grids, cut it into blocks, and stored it in insulated ice houses. Railroads then shipped it to cities, mines, breweries, agricultural operations, and refrigerator car loading points. By 1872,
It's the ice house right
Boca
here.
reportedly shipped more ice, wood, and shingles than any point on the railroad between San Francisco and Omaha. This was one of the earliest large cold chain systems in the West. Truckee did not merely survive its winter, it packaged winter as a product. Household iceboxes, restaurants and hotels, hospitals, breweries, meat and dairy storage, fruit and vegetable transport, refrigerated railroad cars. Mechanical refrigeration eventually destroyed the natural ice industry, economically by making cooling available year-round and closer to where it was needed. Ecological cost of the ice economy. Ice harvesting was less visually dramatic than clear-cut logging, but it still modified ecosystems. The dams and ponds, manipulated water levels, cleared surrounding areas, and used large quantities of sawdust and timber for storage structures. The industry also tied the river system more tightly to industrial schedules. Water became something to impound, freeze, cut, inventory, and ship. That fits your earlier observation perfectly. Glaciers created the landscape, and industrial society later attempted to harvest and export miniature pieces of that same process.
It just like flew over
Boca
the
Beer,
dam and went super
altitude,
low.
cold and rail logistics nearby
incredible.
Boca was also known for its brewery. Its cold environment and railroad access made it practical to produce and ship beer, and the brewery reportedly reached production of roughly 30,000 barrels annually. The connection between ice and beer was direct. Before modern refrigeration, breweries depended heavily on natural cold storage. So the regional industrial system was mutually reinforcing. Forest sawdust insulation and buildings water ice, and brewing railroad distribution winter commercial advantage. Truckee's winter identity was partly invented. In the early railroad era, snow was chiefly an enemy. It blocked trains, collapsed structures, stranded passengers, and isolated communities. Later, Truckee learned to market snow as recreation. Winter carnivals, ski jumping, skating, sledding, and eventually mechanized ski lifts helped transform the region from a place people feared being trapped into a place tourists paid to visit in winter. Truckee held winter carnivals by the late 19th and early 20th centuries, using rail access to bring visitors into the snow, rather than merely through it. That is a remarkable economic reversal. The railroad first fought the snow, then sold tickets to experience it. Early skiing and mechanized lifts. Truckee and the Donner region became important in the development of Western skiing. Snowshoe racing using long Scandinavian-style skis was popular in Sierra mining and railroad communities. Ski jumps, winter competitions, and rope tows followed. He is associated with claims of having one of the country's early mechanized ski lifts, though exact first claims vary depending on the type of lift and definition used. Broader point is solid. Truckee's railroad access, snowfall, and existing hospitality economy helped make it an early winter sports center. The automobile changed Truckee without replacing the railroad. The Lincoln Highway and later US 40 followed the established Trans-Sierra Corridor. Truckee became an automobile stop as well as a railroad town, providing fuel, food, lodging, and mechanical help. Interstate 80 then increased speed and volume, but also changed the town's relationship to travelers. A railroad station or old highway usually forced people into the town. A freeway can move them past it. Truckee therefore had to evolve from a compulsory transportation stop into a destination. Historic downtown, skiing, mountain biking, lake access, restaurants, and second homes. The 1993 Masonic building explosion, the event you remembered, occurred on November 30th, 1993, in Truckee's historic downtown. A propane explosion destroyed the historic Masonic building, a multi-story 19th century structure on Commercial Road. One construction worker was killed, and 7 people were injured, including a 4-year-old child. The upper level contained Josephine's restaurant, while other portions held offices and commercial space. Reports indicated that workers were dealing with the building's propane system during renovation. Escaping propane accumulated and ignited, producing an explosion powerful enough to devastate the structure and damage the surrounding downtown. The accident was particularly shocking because it did not happen in an isolated industrial yard. It occurred in the architectural heart of town, among buildings people associated with Truckee's surviving 19th century character. Why propane is especially dangerous in mountain towns. Propane is heavier than air. When it leaks, it can settle into low spaces such as basements, crawl spaces, and depressions, rather than dispersing upward like some lighter gases. One spark from a switch tool, motor, or open flame can ignite the accumulated fuel-air mixture. Mountain communities often rely on propane, where natural gas pipeline service is limited, making storage tanks and building-level systems common. The sonic explosion therefore reflected a broader infrastructure reality. Remote beauty often depends on decentralized fuel systems that carry their own risks. The Masonic Connection fraternal organizations, such as the Masons, were major civic institutions in 19th century Western towns. A Masonic lodge could function as a meeting place, social network, mutual assistance institution, and marker of local permanence. That matters because early Truckee was highly transient. Railroad laborers, loggers, and travelers came and went. Institutions such as lodges, churches, newspapers, and schools represented the effort to turn a temporary work camp into a stable civic community. So when the Masonic building exploded, the town lost more than a commercial structure. It lost part of the architecture through which early Truckee had declared itself permanent. Charles McGlashan, the town's fascinating and troubling power broker, one of Truckee's most consequential historical figures, was Charles Fayette McGlashan. He was a lawyer, newspaper publisher, civic promoter, amateur scientist, and historian. He published the Truckee Republican, wrote an influential history of the Donner Party, promoted the Donner Monument, and became involved in local scientific and cultural projects. He was also a central leader in Truckee's anti-Chinese campaign and defended men accused in the Trout Creek attack. McGlashan personifies the difficulty of Western history. The same individual could preserve history, build institutions, promote science, and participate in organized racial persecution. Truckee cannot honestly celebrate his civic contributions while omitting the people he helped drive away. The Butterfly Collection and the Rocking Stone. McGlashan became known for collecting butterflies and other specimens, reportedly amassing a large collection. His family home and museum became a local curiosity. He also promoted a large balancing boulder known as the Rocking Stone, which could once reportedly be moved slightly by human pressure, despite its great size. It became a roadside attraction and symbol of Truckee's unusual geology. These eccentric scientific and promotional interests were part of how Truckee transitioned from purely industrial town to tourist destination. Donner Party memory shaped Truckee's identity, although the Donner Party camps were primarily near Donner Lake and Alder Creek rather than downtown Truckee. The disaster became inseparable from the town's public identity. Truckee businesses, museums, and tourism repeatedly invoked the story. McGlashan's writing helped shape the way Americans understood it. Donner Memorial State Park and the Pioneer Monument later formalized the memory. This produced a strange relationship. Truckee is named for an indigenous guide who helped emigrants, yet its international fame became tied to the emigrant party that failed to complete the crossing before winter. One represents successful indigenous knowledge of the landscape. The other represents catastrophic miscalculation by newcomers. The old jail, Truckee's surviving old jail, was built in 1875 and now operates as a museum maintained by the Truckee Donner Historical Society. It reflects the town's effort to impose permanent civic order on a volatile railroad settlement. A jail was part of the same infrastructure ecosystem as the depot, roundhouse, firehouse, and newspaper, mechanisms for managing the concentration of people created by transportation. Jibboom Street. The name Jibboom Street is one of Truckee's especially colorful remnants. Jib boom is a nautical term, and the street name recalls the loose, improvised naming habits common in Western towns. Truckee has several place names that feel transported from maritime, mining, railroad, and immigrant vocabularies. That is because Western towns were assembled by people carrying language from many previous worlds. Repeated fires explain the brick downtown. Like many 19th century railroad towns, Truckee suffered repeated fires. Early commercial buildings were often wood, tightly packed and heated with stoves. Wind, dry lumber, sparks, and limited firefighting capacity allowed fire to move rapidly. The surviving brick buildings along Commercial Row represent both prosperity and adaptation. Brick was more expensive but offered better resistance to the recurring town-wide threat. Truckee's historic appearance is therefore partly the visible result of disaster learning. Why the main street and railroad are so close. The commercial district grew immediately beside the tracks because nearly everything arrived or departed by rail. Asterisk Visk mail. Asterisk newspapers. Asterisk food. Asterisk manufactured goods. Asterisk fuel. Asterisk machinery. Asterisk lumber. Asterisk ice. Asterisk livestock. Asterisk workers. A business near the depot captured customers and freight. Distance from the tracks meant extra handling. Today, having trains bisect downtown can feel inconvenient or dangerous. Proximity to the rails was the equivalent of being beside the airport terminal, freeway interchange, fiber connection, and freight warehouse all at once. Technology was converted into logistics. The clearest way to understand its environmental history is to see how every natural feature became part of a supply chain. Asterisk granite became road cuts, tunnel obstacles, and building material. Asterisk forest became ties, snow sheds, fuel, and export lumber. Asterisk snow became both obstruction and tourism. Asterisk ice became refrigerated commerce. Asterisk river water became transport support, industry, and downstream allocation. Asterisk meadows became town sites, grazing land and development property. Asterisk mountain scenery became real estate and recreational value. Truckee's economy repeatedly survived by changing what it considered the landscape to be. From extraction to amenity economy, the earlier Truckee economy largely removed resources. Asterisk cut the timber. Asterisk harvest the ice. Asterisk move freight. Asterisk service locomotives. Increasingly sells access and experience. Asterisk ski the snow. Asterisk bicycle the trails. Asterisk climb the rocks. Asterisk rent or buy the view. Asterisk eat in the historic buildings. Asterisk experience the railroad heritage. The environmental impact did not disappear. It changed form. Contemporary pressures include housing expansion, traffic, wildfire exposure, water use, habitat fragmentation, short-term rentals, and the carbon footprint of long-distance recreation. A landscape can move from being logged to being loved and still be heavily pressured. Truckee incorporated surprisingly late despite its 19th century origins. Truckee did not incorporate as a municipality until 1993. That means the historic railroad town existed for well over a century before becoming the incorporated town of Truckee. Incorporation gave residents greater local control over planning, development, and public services at a time when rapid regional growth was changing the community. And remarkably, the Masonic Building explosion occurred in the same year. Truckee today is still a rail town. It may now present itself primarily as a mountain recreation community, but the original Transcontinental Railroad remains active through downtown. Union Pacific freight trains, including double-stack container traffic, and Amtrak passenger trains continue to pass the depot. So Truckee is not a preserved movie set representing a dead railroad era. It remains attached to the living freight system connecting the Port of Oakland, California, and the continental interior. The locomotives and cargo changed, but the corridor's national purpose remains recognizable. The central Truckee thesis: Truckee is the town where America learned that crossing a mountain once is not enough. The wagons needed stations. The railroad needed yards, crews, and repairs. The snow sheds needed timber and maintenance. The locomotives needed water and fuel. The lumber companies needed railroads. The ice companies needed refrigerated distribution. The highway needed hotels, gas, and mechanics. The ski economy needed roads, electricity, and lodging. The digital economy now needs fiber, cellular networks, satellites, and power. Truckee is the accumulated support structure for every generation that tried to cross, exploit, survive, or enjoy the Sierra. To say it on your live stream would be, Donner Pass is the famous engineering achievement, but Truckee is the maintenance civilization behind it. Washington authorized the railroad, Chinese laborers and thousands of others built it, the forests and river paid much of the ecological price, and Truckee became the permanent machine that kept the crossing alive. And one more. Truckee is named for an indigenous man who was not from the town, built around a railroad financed from Washington, sustained by immigrants it later expelled, surrounded by forests it once cut down, and now prosperous, because people come to experience the nature and history created by all those collisions.
the politicians used to come on the train, and when the train they would come, that was a major stop point for the politicians at various times and campaigns. Okay, also, I wanted to talk about, now I've gone to Boca, now I'm headed down. I noticed the geology changed drastically very quickly past Boca. Um, and the um, Army Corps of Engineer history is also fascinating by Truckee. So now I'm headed towards Reno. So explain the connection between Truckee and Reno and anything in between. Also, isn't there a bike path or something in between the two towns, which is fascinating? And um, how do people in Reno use Truckee, and how is Truckee also part of like Salt Lake City's world? Ready to leave California? Here we go. Goodbye, California. Hello, Nevada.
Truckee was a natural presidential and political whistle stop because nearly every important rail journey between California and the East had to pass through it. Now, heading east from Boca toward Reno, You are watching the landscape transform from the forested Sierra into the drier Great Basin, almost in real time. Truckee as a political stage before air travel and modern highways, a Western political tour was fundamentally a railroad operation. Truckee was not necessarily the largest electoral prize, but it was a highly visible gateway, the first substantial California mountain town encountered by eastbound travelers, and one of the final California stops for westbound national figures. Presidents and major political figures could speak briefly from the rear platform, greet local officials, veterans, and railroad workers, and then continue without rebuilding the entire travel operation. Local history records visits by Ulysses S. Grant, Rutherford B. Hayes, Grover Cleveland, William McKinley, and Theodore Roosevelt, although some came as sitting presidents, some as former presidents or national figures, and not every visit was an election campaign. One source appears to contain a name error, Chester A. Garfield, apparently conflating Presidents Chester A. Arthur and James A. Garfield, so that particular entry should be treated cautiously. The best documented example is Theodore Roosevelt's 1903 Western tour. Addressed a crowd at Truckee from his train, thanked Civil War veterans present, and used the stop to connect national unity, Western development, and citizenship. That gives Truckee a very direct Washington connection. Washington created the railroad through federal legislation, and then the railroad carried Washington's political leadership back through the communities that federal policy had helped create. The station became a temporary town square. The train was transportation, stage office, security perimeter, press bus, and communications center, all at once, the 19th century equivalent of arriving with Air Force One, a motorcade, and a mobile television studio. For your own campaign and live stream, there is an especially good comparison. Roosevelt could speak from the back of one train to the people physically gathered beside the tracks. You can stand in the same corridor and speak through cameras, cellular networks, and satellites to people anywhere. Why the geology changes so suddenly after Boca? What you noticed is real. Boca lies near a major environmental and geological transition between the High Sierra Nevada and the western edge of the Basin and Range Province. West of Truckee and around Donner Summit, the landscape is dominated by high elevation Sierra terrain, extensive granitic rock, glacially modified basins and ridges, heavier snowfall, denser conifer forest. As you move east from Truckee through Boca, Florestan, and Verdi, several things happen together. 1. Elevation generally decreases. 2. You move deeper into the Sierra's rain shadow. 3. The forest becomes more open. 4. Sagebrush and dry country vegetation become more prominent. 5. Volcanic and sedimentary rocks become more visually important. 6. The terrain increasingly expresses faulting and basin and range structure. USGS work specifically notes that Boca is far enough east of the Sierra crest to experience reduced precipitation from the rain shadow effect. So the rapid change is not just geology and not just climate. It is their interaction. The Sierra forces Pacific air upward. The air cools and drops much of its moisture on the western slopes and crest. Descending eastward, it warms and dries. Within a relatively short distance, you go from a snowy alpine forest system towards semi-arid Great Basin conditions. A useful line is, at Boca, the Sierra does not end like a wall. Forest thins, moisture falls away, granite gives way to more volcanic and basin and range terrain, and California begins turning into Nevada. The Truckee River is your guide into Reno from Truckee eastward. The river becomes the organizing feature of the corridor. The Truckee River begins at Lake Tahoe's outlet, passes through Truckee, Boca, Florestan, Verdi, Reno, and Sparks, and ultimately flows to Pyramid Lake. It does not reach the ocean. It belongs to the internally drained Great Basin. That is one reason the passage feels so coherent. You are following the river, the railroad, old highway alignments, Interstate 80, power and communications lines, Asterisk a recreational trail. All are squeezed into the same relatively narrow canyon.
Wow. Look at that.
The river found the gradient first.
That's everything right there.
Humans then repeatedly borrowed its corridor.
This is the whole game.
Boca, a vanished industrial town and a federal water site. Boca was once far more than a reservoir recreation area. It developed as a railroad, lumber, ice and brewing settlement near the confluence of the Little Truckee and Truckee Rivers. Its cold winters supported industrial ice harvesting. Timber from surrounding forests supported construction and icehouse insulation. The railroad made it possible to ship both ice and manufactured goods. Boca's brewery became regionally important because cold conditions, water, and transportation all converged there. Most of the original town disappeared. Foundations and fragments remain, while the landscape is now dominated by water infrastructure and recreation. Boca Dam was Bureau of Reclamation, not primarily Army Corps. This is an important distinction. Boca Dam was built by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, part of the Department of the Interior, and completed in 1939-1940 as part of the Truckee Storage Project. It stores water on the Little Truckee River and supports downstream water management. Reclamation also completed major seismic safety modifications at Boca Dam in 2020. The Army Corps of Engineers has a major role farther downstream in flood risk planning and river engineering, especially in the Reno Sparks Truckee Meadows. It also participates in federal water control coordination, studies and permitting. Clean distinction is Bureau of Reclamation, storage, irrigation and multi-purpose western water infrastructure such as Boca Dam. Army Corps of Engineers, flood risk management, channel and levee projects, federal water control planning and permitting. Their responsibilities can overlap, but they are not the same institution. Why Reno cares about reservoirs near Truckee Reno is downstream of a high mountain watershed capable of producing both drought and destructive floods. The most dangerous combination is often not ordinary snowmelt, but a warm atmospheric river or rain-on snow event. Heavy rain falls on an existing snowpack, rapidly releasing water into the Truckee River. The narrow upper canyon funnels that water toward the broad Truckee Meadows, where Reno and Sparks developed. Historic Truckee River floods occurred repeatedly, and the January 1997 flood caused more than $500 million in reported damage in the Reno Sparks area. That disaster became a major focus of Army Corps flood risk studies and regional planning. The reservoirs upstream Boca, Prosser Creek, Stampede, and others therefore form part of a larger managed system involving flood control, water supply, irrigation, endangered fish, recreation, interstate obligations, Pyramid Lake, tribal water rights, drought storage. Truckee and Reno are connected by gravity. What happens upstream does not remain a California issue. Florestan, the industrial canyon town between Boca and the Nevada line, Florestan is worth noticing. It developed as an industrial company town, particularly around paper and pulp manufacturing. Its location made sense because it had river water, railroad transportation, timber access, space within the canyon, proximity to California and Nevada markets. But pulp and paper production historically created severe odor and water pollution problems. Florestan illustrates the next phase after logging. Once trees were cut, industry processed the fiber close to the transportation line and water source. The canyon was not merely crossed. It was used as an industrial machine. The California-Nevada border is politically sharp but geographically weak. You cross a state line near Verdi, but the ecological and economic region does not suddenly reset. Truckee, Verdi, and Reno share the same river, the same rail corridor, Interstate 80, wildfire smoke and risk, regional tourism, employment and housing markets, airport access, winter weather disruptions. The border changes taxes, law, planning systems, and governmental jurisdiction. It does not change the watershed. This is a classic example of your upstream-downstream principle. The river has no knowledge that California ends and Nevada begins. Verdi, gateway into Nevada. Verdi sits where the narrow mountain canyon begins, opening toward the Truckee Meadows. It was another railroad and lumber community, and its location remains strategically important because the rail line, I-80, and river all pass through the same constrained approach to Reno. Verdi also functions psychologically as the threshold. Asterisk westbound, it is the entrance to the Sierra. Asterisk eastbound, it is the release from the canyon into the Reno Basin. The famous Verdi name reportedly arose from pulling the name of Italian composer Giuseppe Verdi from a hat during railroad-era naming, although local naming stories can acquire mythology over time. Reno and Truckee are complementary towns. Truckee and Reno are close, roughly 30 to 40 road miles, depending on the points measured, but they perform different regional functions. Truckee offers Reno residents, asterisk cooler summer weather, asterisk snow and skiing, asterisk mountain biking and hiking, asterisk Donner Lake and access toward Tahoe, asterisk cabins and second homes, asterisk historic mountain town tourism, asterisk access to the Western Sierra. Reno offers Truckee residents, asterisk a major commercial airport, asterisk larger hospitals and specialist medicine, asterisk big box retail and broader services, asterisk universities and colleges, asterisk entertainment and major events, asterisk jobs not dependent on mountain tourism, asterisk lower elevation alternatives during severe winter weather. Truckee is a mountain amenity and gateway town. Reno is the metropolitan service and logistics center. People can live in one and work, shop, fly, or seek healthcare in the other. That makes them less like isolated cities and more like unequal parts of one trans-state region. Reno's airport is part of Truckee's infrastructure. The Reno-Tahoe International Airport is a major reason Truckee can function as a national and international resort community. Fly into Reno, rent a car or use ground transport, and reach Truckee or North Lake Tahoe without crossing the entire Sierra from Sacramento or the Bay Area. In that sense, Reno provides Truckee with a metropolitan-scale front door. Conversely, Truckee and Tahoe give Reno a globally marketable identity. Even the airport's name says Reno Tahoe, acknowledging that the city and mountain destination sell each other. Housing and labor connect the two, but unequally. Truckee's tourism and second home economy create expensive housing and seasonal labor demands. Reno Sparks and nearby Nevada communities can serve as more affordable residential bases for some workers, although Reno itself has also experienced substantial housing cost growth. That can produce long commutes through a mountain corridor subject to asterisk snow, asterisk chain controls, asterisk wildfire, asterisk crashes, asterisk rockfall, asterisk flooding, asterisk freeway closures. Other infrastructure truth. A resort economy may appear local, but its labor force can depend on a much larger and less visible regional housing system. The bike path, yes, but it is not one simple uninterrupted urban trail. You are thinking of the Tahoe Pyramid Trail, a remarkable project intended to follow the Truckee River roughly 114 miles from Lake Tahoe to Pyramid Lake. It combines asterisk separated paved paths, asterisk dirt trail, asterisk former road beds, asterisk local streets, asterisk bike lanes, asterisk shared road sections. The project conceptually connects Tahoe City, Truckee, Hirschdale, Florestan, Verdi, Reno, Sparks, Wadsworth, and Pyramid Lake. Around Truckee, the Truckee River Legacy Trail provides a paved multi-use route from downtown toward Glenshire. Truckee reports more than 35 miles of paved Class I trails across its wider network. The Hirschdale to Verdi portion is about 16 miles and mixes dirt, pavement, bike lanes, and roads shared with cars. It is not a completely protected, effortless bicycle freeway between Truckee and Reno. From Verdi through Reno and Sparks, the route increasingly joins urban streets and the paved Truckee River multi-use path. In Reno, the river trail continues for miles through parks and downtown. But yes, a person can conceptually follow the river by bicycle from the mountains into Reno. but the route's comfort and separation vary greatly. The bike trail is the newest reuse of the Continental Corridor. This may be the best part of it. The same corridor has carried 1. Indigenous foot travel. 2. Emigrant wagons. 3. Railroad construction workers. 4. Transcontinental trains. 5. Lincoln Highway motorists.
Fat horses.
6. Interstate traffic. 7. Power and communications.
Horses before wagons.
8. Recreational cyclists. The bicycle trail is not replacing the industrial systems. It is fitting a human-scale route back into the narrow spaces left between them. The traveler on the trail can see freight trains, trucks, river ecology, old highway segments, dams, and industrial ruins all in one journey. It is a moving museum without walls. Why Reno exists where it does. Reno developed where the Truckee River emerged into the broader Truckee meadows and where transportation routes could spread out again. The river supplied water. The valley offered land. The railroad brought continental access. Nearby mining districts, especially the Comstock, centered around Virginia City, generated commerce, passengers, and capital. Reno became a rail and commercial junction, rather than simply a river settlement. The Central Pacific Transcontinental Line connected it east and west, while regional transportation linked it with Carson City and the mining districts. The city later developed gambling, divorce tourism, warehousing, manufacturing, logistics, technology, and outdoor tourism. But the original reason for its importance was still the corridor you are following. The Virginia and Truckee Railroad is a different, Truckee, one possible source of confusion. The famous Virginia and Truckee Railroad did not primarily connect Virginia City to the town of Truckee. Its name referred to the Truckee River region/Truckee Meadows, and the line linked the Comstock area with Carson City, and later Reno. It carried ore, timber, machinery, passengers, and goods associated with Comstock economy. So Truckee appears in both the California town and Nevada transportation history, because the river and regional names spread farther than the town itself. How Truckee is part of Salt Lake City's world. Truckee's connection to Salt Lake City is first and foremost continental and railroad-based. The historic transcontinental sequence linked Sacramento, Donner Pass, Truckee, Reno, Northern Nevada, Utah, Ogden. The original 1869 joining of the Central Pacific and Union Pacific occurred at Promontory Summit, northwest of Salt Lake City. Ogden then became the principal railroad junction through which much east-west traffic passed. Salt Lake City was slightly south of the original main transcontinental line, but it quickly became connected by branch lines, and later by more direct routes. Utah's railroad network tied Salt Lake's mining, finance, agriculture, and population into the same national system. Today, I-80 reinforces that same relationship. Reno and Salt Lake City occupy successive major positions along one east-west transportation spine. Truckee controls the Sierra Crossing. Reno anchors the Western Great Basin. Salt Lake City anchors the Eastern Great Basin and Wasatch Front. Separated by desert and mountains. One way to understand Western cities is as serviced islands connected by long infrastructure corridors. Between Reno and Salt Lake City lie enormous distances, sparse populations, desert basins, and mountain ranges. The railroad and I-80 create a linear civilization across that terrain. Along that line move containers from California ports, manufactured goods, food, fuel, military freight, mail and parcels, tourists, political ideas, data through fiber corridors. Truckee may feel culturally oriented toward California and Tahoe, while Reno and Salt Lake feel increasingly Great Basin and Interior West. But all three owe much of their modern existence to the same transcontinental line. Freight connects Oakland, Truckee, Reno, and Salt Lake. A double-stack container train coming from the port of Oakland can climb the Sierra, pass through Truckee and Reno, cross Nevada, and continue through Utah into the National Rail Network. That means Truckee is physically part of Salt Lake City's supply chain geography, even when their local cultures appear very different. Truckee is the mountain gate. Reno is the western basin hub. Salt Lake is the eastern basin hub. The train sees them as nodes on one network. The river and railroad eventually separate. The Truckee River guides you from Truckee into Reno, but it continues east and eventually turns toward Pyramid Lake. The Transcontinental Railroad and I-80 continue farther east towards central Nevada, Utah, and the rest of the country. This is an important transition. Asterisk west of Reno, transportation is heavily constrained by the River Canyon. Asterisk east of Reno, the continental routes begin crossing broad basins and intervening mountain ranges. Asterisk the river remains regional. Asterisk the railroad and interstate become explicitly continental. Reno is therefore a branching point where the water geography and national transportation geography begin heading toward different destinations. The full meaning of the drive you are making from Truckee to Reno. You are not simply descending from California into Nevada. You are moving, asterisk from the Sierra Nevada into the Great Basin, asterisk from a timber and snow landscape toward a sagebrush and desert landscape, asterisk from a maintenance town toward a metropolitan logistics center, asterisk from a river canyon into an open basin, asterisk from California's political system into Nevada's, asterisk from the mountain gateway toward the long interior route to Salt Lake City. And every layer remains visible at once. River, trail, road, interstate, railroad, dams, power lines, and satellite communications. A good live stream summary would be, Truckee and Reno are not separate accidents. The same river, railroad, and interstate created them for different jobs. Truckee maintains and markets the mountain crossing. Reno receives the corridor as it opens into the Great Basin. Beyond Reno, the water turns toward Pyramid Lake, but the rails and highway continue toward Salt Lake City and the continent. And for the political history, before politicians flew over places like Truckee, they had to pass through them. The presidential train made the depot a national stage, and for a few minutes the people of a mountain railroad town stood face to face with Washington. I can track the historical and engineering landmarks east of Reno as you continue along I-80.
So the developments by north of Verdi are enormous expansion of real estate housing and developments. So far reminds me of expansion like Las Vegas.
What you're seeing is part of Reno Spark's outward growth, pushing into former open land around Verdi and northwest Reno. I'm checking which projects are visible from your route and how closely the Las Vegas comparison fits. Photos and video of the Callan at Verdi Village in Reno NV. Yes, the comparison to Las Vegas style outward expansion is visually and structurally fair. North and east of Verdi, you are seeing the Reno metropolitan edge turn open foothills and former ranch or undeveloped land into large planned residential districts. The most visible growth is associated with the Verdi and Northwest Reno development belt, including communities around Cabela Drive, Boomtown, Somerset, and the large Quilisi area projects. One contested Verdi proposal alone involved 632 residential lots, and a court ultimately ordered Reno to approve it after the city council had denied it. Why it resembles Las Vegas? Both places grow by extending master plan subdivisions outward across dry terrain. From the freeway, you see pale graded earth spreading over hillsides, enormous retaining cuts and pads, repeated house plans, new arterial roads built before full occupancy, walls, drainage channels, and utility trenches, a sharp boundary between finished suburb and open land. Because vegetation is sparse, the entire active city building is exposed. In a forested place, construction can disappear behind trees. In Nevada, you can visually read the whole development machine at once. But Reno has a tighter physical container than Las Vegas. It is constrained by the Sierra, Peavine Mountain, the Truckee River, federal land, steep slopes, and wildfire terrain. Las Vegas expands across a much broader valley floor. Reno's limited buildable land helps make its new housing relatively expensive. Recent reporting put the Reno Metro's median listing price substantially above Las Vegas, despite Reno's smaller scale. Why all this growth is happening? Reno is no longer growing only as a casino town. Its economy has expanded into logistics, warehousing, advanced manufacturing, technology, data infrastructure, and regional distribution. Its proximity to California, lack of Nevada state individual income tax, outdoor access, and Reno Tahoe Airport also attract retirees, remote workers, and buyers arriving with California equity. In 2025, nearly 43% of online views of Reno listings reportedly came from California metropolitan areas. Verdi is particularly desirable because it offers a hybrid identity, close enough to Reno for work, shopping, in the airport, but west enough to feel connected to Truckee, Tahoe, and the mountains. That makes it a premium metropolitan frontier rather than merely cheap peripheral land. The infrastructure arrives as a package. Those houses require much more than streets and lumber. The development pushes outward: water and sewer systems, electrical distribution, schools and fire response, freeway interchanges, retaining and drainage structures, broadband, snow removal, wildfire evacuation capacity. The I-80 corridor itself is being rebuilt between Boomtown and Western Reno, with Nevada DOT replacing 7 bridges between the Mayan Avenue and Boomtown exits through 2028. So you are watching housing expansion and transportation reconstruction occur simultaneously. The population creates infrastructure demand, and improved infrastructure unlocks more development. The ecological and public safety price. This terrain is not empty. Development replaces sagebrush habitat, alters runoff, fragments wildlife movement, and places more people at the wildland-urban interface. Hillside grading can make the mountain contours feel almost manufactured. Water is especially important. Unlike Las Vegas, Reno has the Truckee River and Sierra snowpack immediately upstream, but that supply is highly managed and contested. New homes add permanent demand to a system already balancing urban supply, drought storage, agriculture, pyramid lake, and tribal and ecological obligations. Wildfire is the other major issue. Each subdivision adds homes requiring defensible space, evacuation roads, firefighting capacity, and reliable power. A community may have attractive mountain views precisely because it sits against combustible open land. The deeper connection to your trip. You have just followed the original Transcontinental corridor from Sacramento across Donner Pass. Now you are seeing what happens when a corridor succeeds for 150 years. The railroad made Reno accessible. The highway made it expandable. The interstate made commuting and freight practical. California wealth and the new Reno economy increased demand. Then bulldozers converted the surrounding landscape into the next layer of the corridor. A good line for the live stream is, open quote, "This looks like Las Vegas expansion," because the desert leaves the entire process visible. Roads, pads, walls, and houses advancing across the land. But this is Reno's western frontier, built between the Sierra, the Truckee River, and Interstate 80. And every new route also creates a new obligation for water, fire protection, evacuation, and transportation, close quote, or even tighter, open quote. The railroad brought the town here. The interstate is now spreading the town back out along the railroad, close quote.
I've already in Reno, and there's been at least 5 pretty struggling people. So I just got to a new town. For all those people that talk shit about California and Los Angeles and stuff, I just want you to look around. But let's just Get back to what you're doing. That was insane. Look at this crystal ice and oil. Big building. Woof. What's this? Um. Wow. Okay. Um. There's a catamaran. That's the second yellow Hobie I've seen today. The other one was up in the mountains. So cool. $91 degrees outside. There's the missing people statue. Wait, what? That was the statue from the Palisades. What? Mine Museum. Well, I have no idea what Starling's gonna do during this this moment. Oh, where's the oh, where's the It's like Vegas, sort of. I don't know how to describe this. I mean, I've been here before, but this is. I mean, have I been here? Have I been to Reno before? Maybe not. I feel like I have. No, maybe not. Have, oh, kind of have a feel like I've been here. Maybe I just watched this TV show enough. I'm ready for a break, a bathroom break, and food break. How long have I been going for? 2.5 hours. Let's go, baby. Hope I find a nice safe parking spot. That's the goal. Now, the reason why I'm here is because I went to the UC Davis, University of Nevada, Reno Science Center up at Lake Tahoe and have to come follow up down here. So this is me following up on the thread from my summer trip. And then everything else, first of all, everything else from Truckee on has been new. And then this is why I'm here. This is why we're going this direction following the Transcontinental. This is one of the reasons why. I mean, number of reasons why. Home of the Wolfpack, University of Nevada, Reno. That's cool. Okay. Oh, maybe I should have gone right back there. Okay. Well, I have no idea where I'm going. I need to have access. Okay, there's a parking structure. Should go right here. See what happens. Okay, that is not. That is definitely not. What's this? Orientation parking. Permit required. All right, I saw. Woo! This is gonna be a tricky bit. I'm gonna go around. I'm gonna go this. Dear diary, don't just look up where you have to go. Look up the parking for it. Oh man, you should just get handicapped. You've been so hard to ask for help. This is what happens. Oh, we're not going that way. Well, you found the campus. We're definitely there. The question is, oh, fuck. Okay. 92 degrees. Man, it's gonna get. Is this gonna be hot today here? Silver and blue outfits. So what's the deal with Virginia City? Was that the previous major town before the railroad came in? Pedestrian first. I mean, even Reno has it. That's what I'm saying. When the red towns are more accessible than the blue towns, it makes you scratch your head, you little liberal numbnuts. I'm just saying, no, but neither side is right. And for the other one to argue that the other one is worse always is just ridiculous. They've got the vibrotactile buttons here and a random stop sign in the middle of this Republican town. Santa Monica, you got a lot to work on if you want to claim yourself as better. All right, let's find this part. All vibrotactile buttons, all of them. They all have the bumps on the crosswalks too.
8 United States towns with unforgettable main streets. Yes, Virginia City was the dominant urban and economic center of western Nevada before Reno became the major railroad city. But the sequence is slightly more precise than Virginia City existed, then the railroad arrived and replaced it. Virginia City came first because of silver merit. Virginia City exploded into existence after the Comstock lode discovery in 1859. The Comstock was an extraordinarily rich body of silver and gold ore beneath Mount Davidson. Within a few years, Virginia City became the largest, richest, and most technologically advanced city in the region, described as the leading industrial city between San Francisco and Denver. At its height, the greater Comstock district had tens of thousands of people with giant mines and stamp mills, banks and stock speculation, newspapers and telegraph lines, theaters, hotels, and more than 100 saloons, sophisticated pumps, hoists, and underground engineering, immense demand for timber, machinery, food, and labor. It was not merely an Old West camp. It was an industrial extraction metropolis built on a mountain. Reno barely existed yet. Stands today was initially a Truckee River crossing known as Fuller's Crossing and later Lakes Crossing. It served wagon traffic, but it was minor compared with Virginia City, Carson City, and even some other mining settlements. The Central Pacific selected Lakes Crossing for a depot while constructing the Transcontinental Railroad. The railroad auctioned town lots and formally established Reno in 1868, naming it for Union General Jesse Lee Reno. Reno was therefore fundamentally a railroad-created city. So around 1860-1867, the regional hierarchy was roughly Virginia City, mining and money powerhouse Carson City, territorial state capital and supply center. Lakes Crossing, small river and wagon stop. Reno, after 1868, rapidly growing transcontinental rail junction. The Transcontinental Railroad did not initially bypass Virginia City, it fed it. The Central Pacific ran through the Truckee River corridor in Reno because a transcontinental railroad needed manageable grades. Virginia City sits high in the Virginia Range, roughly 1,500 feet above the Reno-Carson valleys. Running the main continental line directly through Virginia City would have required an unnecessary climb and descent. Instead, the railroad created Reno as the low gradient interchange, while a separate feeder railroad connected the Comstock mines to it. That feeder was the Virginia and Truckee Railroad, begun in 1869. It first ran from Virginia City downhill to Carson City, carrying ore to mills along the Carson River and hauling timber, equipment, food, and passengers uphill. The line was extended north from Carson City to Reno in 1872, where it connected with the Central Pacific. The system looked like this: Virginia City Mines, Virginia and Truckee Railroad, Carson City and ore mills, V&T Extension, Reno Central Pacific, and the National Network. So Reno functioned partly as Virginia City's transcontinental loading dock. The name Virginia and Truckee can mislead you. The Virginia and Truckee Railroad did not originally run to the town of Truckee, California. Virginia meant Virginia City. Truckee referred to the Truckee River and Truckee Meadows around Reno. The railroad connected Virginia City, Carson City, and Reno. That is an important distinction on your journey because the word Truckee names Chief Truckee, the Truckee River, the Truckee Meadows, the California town of Truckee, and the Virginia and Truckee Railroad. They are related through the regional name, but they are not all the same destination. Virginia City helped create Reno. Reno's founding came from the Transcontinental Railroad, but its early prosperity was heavily connected to the Comstock. Virginia City needed food, lumber, machinery, mine pumps, replacement parts, labor, finance, mail, and passengers. Reno became the place where much of that entered from the national rail system. Virginia City generated demand. Reno organized movement. The wealth produced by the Comstock also helped finance San Francisco banks, buildings, industries, and political power. Virginia City was therefore part of a much larger network running through Reno, Sacramento, and San Francisco. Then the relationship reversed. Virginia City depended on a finite mineral deposit. Reno depended on a transportation location. When major Comstock production declined after the Bonanza era of the 1870s, Virginia City's population and economy contracted sharply. Reno, however, could continue serving transcontinental passengers and freight, agriculture in the Truckee Meadows, government, legal business, regional commerce, later highways, tourism, divorce residency, gambling, and warehousing. That is why Reno eventually surpassed Virginia City. A mine creates spectacular but potentially temporary wealth. A transportation junction can repeatedly reinvent itself. The reversal was approximately 1860s to 1870s. Virginia City is the giant. Reno is its railroad gateway. Late 1800s, Reno diversifies while the Comstock weakens. 1900s onward, Reno becomes the permanent regional city. Virginia City becomes a much smaller historic and tourism town. Carson City was the third piece. Carson City should not be left out. It was founded before Reno became Nevada's territorial capital in 1861, its state capital in 1864, and stood between Virginia City's mines and the regional division of labor was Virginia City, extraction and speculative wealth. Carson City, government, milling, supplies, and railroad connection. Reno, transcontinental transportation and broader commerce. All three grew from the Comstock, but each developed a different durable purpose. Virginia City also helped make Nevada a state port. The Comstock discovery rapidly increased Nevada's population, taxable wealth, and strategic importance during the Civil War. Nevada became a territory in 1861 and a state in 1864. The familiar slogan, Battleborn, refers to statehood during the Civil War. Comstock wealth and Republican political calculations, including support for Abraham Lincoln and constitutional amendments, were important contexts. It would be too simple to say silver alone purchased statehood, but without the Comstock boom, Nevada's unusually rapid rise to statehood is much harder to imagine. Virginia City was therefore not merely the previous big town. It helped produce Nevada itself as a political entity. It was an engineering laboratory. The mines descended so deeply that they confronted crushing rock pressure, extreme heat, and enormous groundwater inflows. Engineers developed or refined square-set timbering, which supported large, irregular underground openings, powerful pumps, large hoisting systems, compressed air drilling, increasingly advanced milling processes. The famous Sutro Tunnel was driven several miles into the mountain to drain and ventilate the mines, although it became fully operational after the greatest bonanza period. Much of the timber came from the Tahoe and Sierra forests. Logs were moved through flumes and rail systems to feed the mines, mills, and buildings. So Virginia City's silver boom contributed directly to the massive deforestation you noticed around Truckee and Tahoe. Mark Twain emerged there. Samuel Clemens arrived in Nevada with his brother Orion and worked for Virginia City's territorial enterprise. He began using the name Mark Twain while writing in Nevada in the early 1860s. Virginia City's combination of mining fraud, politics, violence, eccentric characters, and sudden wealth provided ideal raw material for his comic voice. The town helped create not only fortunes, but a major American writer. The clearest comparison Virginia City was something like a 19th century combination of a mining boomtown, Wall Street Speculation Center. Strong way to frame it is open. Virginia City was what at its first major metropolis, built high on silver. Reno was built lower down on transportation. When the silver weakened, the railroad remained, and the gateway eventually became bigger than the destination. Close quote. Or even more simply, open quote, Virginia City made the money, Carson City organized the government mills, and Reno connected all of it to the continent. Close quote.
Well, it's cheaper than UCLA parking for sure. I mean, I'm parked right in front of the president of that's the president of the freaking whole school right here. And then I've got all this historical stuff, whatever's going on over there. And I'm in the shade, but not forever. Okay, I think that's a good spot. I'll take it. I need a bathroom. I need food. I need water. I just made it to the W.M. Keck Earth Science and Mineral Engineering Museum. I mean, I have to walk there across the grass, but make it. How far am I? About a quarter mile, about 0.2 miles away from where I gotta go. Right next to the Nevada Bureau of Mines and Geology. And then there's a desert center also. Where's that? Desert. Whoa, there's the Desert Farm Initiative. That's pretty sweet. Okay, that's cool. What was the other one? It's the Nature Center or whatever. So this and then the Desert Research Institute. Where's that? Desert Research Institute. And then I go over there. All right, so I'm gonna do this what time do they close? Okay, so that closes at 4. Okay. Whoa, an Ansari business building. That's cool. X Prize. Right. Let's do this. I hope you enjoyed the stream. It was pretty fun. We did a bunch of, I don't know how many people have done a live driving stream from Donner to Reno. Pretty sweet. Also, the portable. I mean, all I ever want to do is do what's never been done. You know? Super cool. All right, thanks, guys. Bye. Bye. Well, at least I learned I can control it with my hands. Let's do it again. What else can I do? I need to read the instructions. It's freaking doing onboard AI. Let's go. So crazy. You're doing vision.